Talking Supply Chain. In each episode, top supply chain industry professionals and the nation's top thought leaders join host Brian Strait and share their unique insights to help supply chain managers stay one step ahead of their competition. This is Talking Supply Chain. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Talking Supply Chain. I'm your host, Brian Strait, and I'm pleased you're joining me and my guest today as we discuss how a good waste management program can have a positive benefit on your bottom line. Joining me for this discussion is Ray Hatch, CEO of Quest Resource Management Group. Ray, welcome to Talking Supply Chain.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having us.
Great that you're here. This is a topic, obviously, I don't think people spend a lot of time thinking about necessarily. I mean, waste management, it's like, well, I just get a dumpster, throw everything in it, right? But it's so much more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
So to get started, though, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Quest Resource Management Group and what you guys actually do?
Yeah, I appreciate it. We actually do spend a lot of time talking about waste, maybe so our customers don't have to, because that is what we do. Well, actually, what we do is we consider ourselves a B2B business partner, and we solve problems for our businesses that we contract with our clients. And that problem typically revolves around waste, recycling, cost, sustainability, all the problems that exist, around that. So our clients are typically Fortune 500 clients that have, locations across the country. Hopefully, a lot of complexity in their waste streams because that's where we bring more value. And they also have a desire to be more sustainable and cost effective as well. So that's what we do. We serve the whole nation, every zip code, and we handle hundreds of waste streams. So we like to think of ourselves as a comprehensive solution to that issue for clients.
Yeah. And you mentioned sustainability, which is a big part of this, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, a little
Mhm.
later in this podcast. But can you kind of define for me, as I think about it? I mean, when I think of waste management, as I mentioned in the opening, I kind of think of put a dumpster in the yard, I throw things in it, right? And maybe I recycle recycle
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
But can you define what waste management actually is, and what encompasses a waste management program?
Yeah, that's a great question because your experience is actually quite typical. Uh, as far as basically waste is something that comes out my back door and I try to get rid of it and I dump it in a dumpster, which is the default thought process. So waste management itself is more revolving around understanding what is being disposed of out your back door, uh, and what are the best uses for it? How can I most cost effectively handle it? And in many cases now, there's a lot of requirements from ESG type of reporting or other types of diversion goals that companies have, and they need the answers on how to do that. So basically, waste management is a term that is comprehensive around all of those pieces to solve that issue in the most effective way possible for you as a client.
Mhm. So is that maybe the way I was thinking of it is the way that companies kind of traditionally approach this, right? Do you come across a lot of companies that don't really have an understanding as to what waste management is, and maybe just decided that we're just gonna maybe we'll recycle?
Yeah, yeah, and thank goodness for that. Because that's why that creates an opportunity for us to exist. There are the all ends of the spectrum, Brian. There are companies out there that are really sophisticated as to understanding what their waste is, where it's going, what their goals are, and there's many that have absolutely no plan at all. It's usually decentralized, meaning their locations are doing whatever their locations do. So there's no comprehensive knowledge management whatsoever. So the answer is all ends of the spectrum.
Mhm. Yep. So have you seen more companies think about programs?
Oh yeah, and we definitely have, and that's one of the reasons we like the space we live in and the positioning we have in the marketplace because we represent solutions as these companies start to realize it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, more and more companies that have thought of it the way you mentioned earlier, there's a dumpster in the back, I throw it in there, have started to understand they need to do more than that. And therein lies the question. So now what do we do? We have this waste, what do we do? And so solutions like us, we represent the answers to that. So it's becoming more and more of a concern, a key point for companies. And that's a lot of how we're picking up customers today is because of that concern, awareness, desire to do something different, not knowing exactly what it is. So yeah, it's definitely growing, and we're happy about that.
So as part of that, and you mentioned this already, sustainability, right? It's and I
Hmm.
imagine sustainability now is really driving a lot of interest in this area.
Yes, you
Yeah,
know.
so yeah,
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, so how does that change kind of the way waste management is thought about, and what kind of role can sustainability actually play, or waste I
Yeah.
should say, what kind of role can waste management play in sustainability?
Well, yeah, and you've heard of ESG, right? Environmental,
Right.
societal, and governance that everybody talks about today. Uh, we only impact the E, but that's a big one on the environmental side. So sustainability is a relatively simplistic word with a lot of elements to it that are more complex. But basically, when something goes in the landfill, it's the opposite sustainability. So a huge part of sustainability is about diverting waste and tonnage from landfills. And I'm proud to say at our company at Quest, we have about 50% or more of the materials that we handle for our clients get diverted from landfills. And so that's a huge, huge impact. And we do have some clients that are at 90% sustainability, but it's come into play a lot more in the last decade. Uh, 15 over 10 years ago, there was some talk of having sustainable waste practices, but it was pretty much just talk from most companies. It was all about what's the most cost effective way to get this stuff out of here, and that was how the decisions were made. And then a little over time, there started being that position. I believe the role is like chief sustainability officer,
Yeah.
which my experience was initially it was pretty much a dressing role. They weren't part of the decision making process, but it represented at least an awareness of the need to become more sustainable. But as time has gone on, like the chief sustainability officer, whoever's functioning in that role for the company, has had more and more impact in the decision making process on how we handle waste. And so, with that, you've got a lot more expertise, you've got a broader range of concerns around waste besides just the cheapest way to get it out of there. I mean, which types of materials are we throwing away that have a better use than throwing it in the landfill? How much value can we derive from that use? And how much can we divert away from landfill from what we're doing today? And how much of our practices that we have before it becomes waste can limit the waste that's going out there, which is also majorly impactful. So I would say it's evolved from little concern to great concern.
Yep. And I want to go back. You mentioned that I think you guys that Quest is over 50%, and you have or the customers, I should say, your clients,
Hmm.
typically, but you have some as high as 90. And I think those numbers need some context, if you will, because we see companies all the time saying, "Hey, we're diverting 75%, we're diverting 90%, we're diverting 50," right? And
Hmm.
and I think it changes based on the customer, right, and what they're actually trying to divert, because it may be easier to divert 90% when most of it is
Yeah.
easily divert, if it's cardboard, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So can you kind of just talk for a second about what those numbers actually mean in the context, and how maybe people who see companies make these announcements can put that into context as far as that company, and what whether, I mean, 50% may be really good for some companies, for instance.
Oh, yeah. It all depends on the nature of what type of company it is, Brian. Like some of the materials are relatively easily diverted and have landfill. Cardboard's a great example. You mentioned it. When people think about recycling, they typically think of cardboard, aluminum, and plastics, right? And those surely are part of it. But cardboard is an easily marketed material that has value, so it's pretty easy to separate. But the biggie right now, I think, that's driving these percentages up or down for many companies is organic waste. And I'll pick on grocers or utilize grocers that are, or food distributors or food manufacturers in this case. A grocer, for example, the numbers vary, but some people say up to 70% of the material in their compactor that they're throwing away is organic material. And organic material typically always has a use besides the landfill, depending on the availability of composters, animal feed programs, those type of things. And we do a lot of that.
Yeah.
Um, and so the fact is, a grocer can just because I think they can be at 90% diversion with a lot of attention to separation of the materials, finding the right service provider that can identify outlets. And it just depends on what you're doing. It also depends on how well your staff can separate materials. Because I'll just use I'll use organic waste as an example. If you're separating organic waste and then you have people that, I don't know, put light bulbs in there or something really a contamination piece, then the whole thing goes to the landfill. So part of diversion or the diversion for these companies to understand the context, part of it is what types of materials waste are you generating and how recyclable are they or divertible are they. Second, and possibly more important, is how disciplined and knowledgeable are you in understanding those materials and separating so you don't provide contamination. Because once it's a bin, a container, whatever it is contaminated with another material, it pretty much all becomes landfill. So there's a lot of elements. There's the type of business and also the discipline and commitment you have to a diverting program.
Yeah. So in many ways, it's an education and a training process as well, right? Besides just
Oh,
deciding you want to do
very
that.
much so. Very much
Yeah.
so.
And yeah, and I think maybe I had a question a little bit later. Maybe that may fit into that question. We'll see on there. But I wanted to get to a couple of other things, and that is the logistics of running a program, right? You know, there's a lot of programs that companies introduce, but most of the companies, a lot of them, most of them these days have global supply chains, and I don't know, and this is me, right? I don't know whether if I have a global supply chain in 10 countries, can I do one approach to waste management, or do I need to look at each site, maybe each site, each country, each region as a separate entity when it comes to a waste management program?
Sure, absolutely. I think my best answer to that would be I think you need to have, as the company with the global supply chain and you referenced, I think you need to have a singular philosophy and commitment to doing to what your sustainability or waste programs are. But then
Mhm.
that's going to have to be tailored pretty specifically to the different markets in which you're operating on. Some countries have really, really strong requirements, and some less. And so I guess what I'm saying is they need to be bespoke by company, by country, or by region,
Yeah.
uh, relative to that and the regulatory environment you operate in. But the philosophy of your commitment to your overall company goals, I think, is consistent with a tailored deal at the local level.
So the commitment and the initiative can be global, right? But then it
Yes,
needs to be adjusted for the region or the country or the locality, um, in many ways.
absolutely. The
So
regulatory environment in which you operate on as a global supply in a global supply chain, they vary dramatically. The impacts are dramatic. So yes, the philosophy is the same, but you really need to be knowledgeable and have the practices that match those locality environments, I guess, for
yeah.
regulatory.
So I guess the big question then is then how do you actually do that, right? Because I know so many executives who just say do this
Yeah,
and then that's it, right? So if you've got I mean, and in many ways in many ways in my mind that's micromanaging in some extent to some extent, right? The localities to create that local program that the way that fits the locality. So how do you as a big company how do you dive into that small little minutia, if you will?
it's. I think this goes into where I make a commercial for companies like ourselves and others. If you try to do that on your own, you're probably going to struggle and have compromised results.
Mhm.
My suggestion would be to find a really good business partner um, that can help you with those. The amount of effort you'd have to go to as the customer, as a waste generator, to understand all those individual elements is extensive and probably not economically feasible. So the way you do that is you identify partners that can help you with that and build those programs. For example, we aren't doing much outside of U.S., Canada, and Mexico, but there's people in Europe that we know, and there's ways that you can leverage one partner to get that whole knowledge base.
So I just want to shift gears just a little bit and kind of talk about the logistics of running a waste management program. So many of our listeners have global supply chains, and they may be in multiple countries, multiple regions, different areas of even our country that have different policies, regulations in place. So when these companies go to put a waste management program in place, can they do that holistically, or do they need to consider a program that might is a site by site kind of approach to this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my advice would be to have a singular philosophy as a company relative to your sustainability, your waste programs, however you want to do that. And then you have to bespoke it, tailor it to the different countries, the different jurisdictions that you operate in.
Mhm.
Many countries are more stringent than we are in the U.S., and many are considerably less stringent. My suggestion would be to take the highest common denominator and each one and apply it. There's no countries that require you to do less. There's just countries that require you to do more. So if you find whatever the best practice is, you can go back and apply it, even if it's above and beyond the ultimate requirements. For example, if there's something in Europe that you're having to do that you don't have to do in the U.S., it would be great to apply that higher standard across your whole platform. But the answer to your question is, I think you have a singular, holistic philosophy with a site-by-site application need.
Yeah. So then I guess the big question to that then is, if you need to do that, I mean, to me that kind of sounds almost like micromanaging sites, right?
Mm,
But companies, the executives tend to want to put an initiative in place and just let it go. So, so how
yeah,
do you approach this kind of, how do you address this approach and make this work when in much of the rest of your company it's a, hey, here's the process, go do it.
yeah. Well, first of all, you have to have find. I believe you have to find the right business partner.
Mhm.
You know, at Quest, we like to say that none of our customers are in the waste business; they're in the something else business, and it's an important distinction because as a company, you're focused on doing the right thing for your customer, whether it's provide better service, build better widgets, what have you. But you need a partner that does nothing but focus on the important initiative of waste and sustainability. And that partner is going to have all that knowledge you need and the ability to operate almost as your surrogate relative to that with your locations. So my suggestion is keep making better widgets and find a partner that knows how to take care of these waste systems and can tailor your programs to your different needs, whether they different waste streams, different geographies, different regulatory agencies.
Yep. And leverage the partners you do have, right? I mean, because they
Oh
can
yeah,
help you.
yeah. My I would even make this point that if you have and you do obviously as a business, you have a waste partner. If they're not bringing these solutions to you today, you might want to look hard at that relationship because I think those existing partners that you have need to be aligned with what your needs are, not theirs.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you need somebody that's bringing you solutions because again, you're focused on making better widgets, not developing innovative, staying on the cutting edge of waste type of practices.
Yeah. The um the the, the resources that are needed to run these programs, companies are notorious for this, right? They put in a new technology, or they put in a new program. Everything's great for the first 6 months, a year maybe. We report great
Mhm.
results on it. And then it's like, yeah, let's start cutting the resources that we're sending to this program. And then the results aren't there. And this happens with technology investments all the time, right? When the company puts in technology but doesn't really know how to use it correctly.
Yes.
So is a waste management program, is this one of these programs that you can put in and just let go, or is it something that you need to kind of nurture and continue to invest with over time?
Well, you're absolutely right. With any initiative, waste or otherwise, companies over time it loses focus. Right?
Yeah.
There's a new flavor of the day that everybody's concerned about, and once you become that whatever you want to call it, that toy sitting in the back of the closet doesn't get played with anymore. You have a tendency it fades away. So no, it's not a plug and play or set and forget type of program. It's got to have continued nurturing and focus. And so you have to and here's how the best way to do that is communication. So you mentioned initially like possibly put an initiative out there and you have great success, report on it, then it kind of fades away. See, that's how you avoid that. You keep eyes on, you keep those measurements, whatever it is that you happen to set. Diversion goals, different types of waste streams, whatever practice that you want done at your locations. You continue to communicate it out in some way, form that everybody is aware of it. Once you stop doing that, the focus goes away, the attention goes away, the results stop being what they need to be. So it's you need to keep it out in front. And here's a part that's really important, I believe. To be able to do that, you have to have really good data. You have to have a data platform that enables you to communicate simply. What's happening, and what are our deltas? What are our trends? Are our trends up? Are they south? the number in and of itself typically doesn't matter on these measures. It's the trends and the changes and the deltas in between them over time. So the more awareness your site managers, your employees, your supervisors, whatever they are, the more awareness they have of what you're measuring, and the more belief they have in that it's being measured accurately, the more likely your initiative is going to keep the steam that it had to begin with. So again, you need a partner that has that data reporting capability. So as an employer, you can use it.
Yeah. So let's dive into the data a little bit there, right?
Mhm.
As you already noted that many countries, regulations, localities have different regulations around sustainability. Um, Companies are increasingly being required to disclose some of this stuff. The SEC, for instance, has issued guidelines on reporting third-party carbon emissions going forward. There is a big push in the world to monitor scope 3 emissions in supply chains,
Yes.
um, obviously, which waste plays a role in some of this stuff, right? So you mentioned, getting the right data, using the data. So how do we monitor and measure to get this data, and then what kind of data should we be looking at here? And is it about setting benchmarks and measuring against that, or how do we approach the data kind of portion of this?
Well, first you have to make sure that the ability to gather the data accurately and timely is there, and I don't overestimate how difficult that is for a lot of folks. So, like companies like ourselves and others need to have and do have a focus on providing just that. It's not just about getting the waste out of your back door and telling you we're doing the right things with it. You need to know what was picked up, how much of it, where was it picked up, and where is it going. You
Mhm.
need to know those things. And a good service provider is going to have that data for you by location and macro and micro, however you want to do that. So you got to have the data, and it's got to be the kind that's relatively irrefutable as to that. And so, scope three is an interesting thing and not greatly understood by all. Waste is a great piece to start or do your scope three in because it's relatively simple to measure. There's a EPA has, I believe it's warm. What is Yeah, EPA has a calculation, a model. It's the waste reduction model, and what that does is you're able to feed in the type of material, the tonnage, all that stuff, and create uh, a really good scope three type of forecast on what that is. So waste is a great place to look at scope three. As you can imagine, scope three is pretty complicated in other areas. You have to go way outside of your own practice to get information to provide it. With waste, you're able to do that. So I guess what I'm saying is waste is a really good scope three emission piece to use from a measurement due to that model that the EPA has provided.
Yeah. So it may be a great piece of this, right? But at the end of the day, what does the C-suite care about, right? It's the bottom
Yeah.
line, right? and
Yeah.
and history is littered with projects that were great projects at one point that didn't contribute enough or at all to the bottom line in a positive manner, maybe actually kind of drew away from it, and they got killed because of it. So
Mhm.
where does waste management programs fit into the bottom line? Is there financial gain to be had? Is this just simply about emission sustainability? What kind of payback can you kind of expect from putting in a program?
I think, and now I'm giving you an opinion based on a lot of years of doing this. First of all, you're absolutely right. Back to that flavor of the day thing, I think there's one flavor that never changes, and that's cutting costs and increasing profitability, right? I mean, that's what we all do. I'm the CEO of a public company, so I'm cognizant of that every day as well. But what I've come to learn is the best companies that are, first of all, I'll say that if the only reason you're providing sustainable practices is because somebody's making you, or you feel like you have to report that. As soon as you quit doing it, as soon as people quit caring, you quit doing it.
Mhm.
The companies I've seen, and these are really, really great companies in general, great companies, they have strong sustainable practices that are part of their core, their DNA, because they believe in being great corporate citizens. So there's got to be a commitment beyond just satisfying some investor that wants you to provide data, right? Which is unfortunately what a lot of ESG is. um, Good companies do good things typically. And the next piece that's really important is years ago, um, sustainable practices meant more expensive practices always. So the question was, how bad do you want to be green? In other words, how much money are you willing to spend? How much compromise are you going to make on your earnings per share to be green? Today, that's really not the case. The infrastructure has grown so dramatically and the technology has grown so dramatically that in many cases, a well executed sustainable program at your location will provide enough value in those materials that will offset extra costs and you can be cost neutral or in many cases cost better. So one of the keys to make sure the summary is one of the keys to make sure companies don't discontinue your program because it's too expensive is to make it not more expensive, and that's our job.
Yeah. Yep. We've got time for one more question, but I am going to cheat a little bit and kind of sneak in two questions here on you.
Sure.
Um, for the audience out there listening today, my guess is some percentage, and probably a significant percentage, don't actually have a waste management program in place at the moment. So the first question is, how do they go about getting started on that and thinking about getting started in a program? And then the second part, obviously, which is correlation to this, is for the companies that do have a program in place, but maybe they don't feel like they're getting the benefits that they think they should, whether it's financial, sustainable, whatever the benefit they don't think they're getting. How do they sit back and say, how do we address this issue? How do we determine what we're doing well and what we need to do better?
Um, to your first question, I commend any company that doesn't have a program in place today in accelerating that and putting one in place as soon as possible. And again, it's not just to be a better corporate citizen. It's also, it's just good for the business. It's the right thing to do. So you need to find the right partner. I'd make a commercial for ourselves, but there are other companies I'm sure as well. You need to have the right partner that has that knowledge base to help you understand, because to know what you need to do, you need to know what your situation is currently, and every company is different. You're throwing away different materials in different quantities in different places. So you need somebody that has the knowledge to come in and build a custom program for you. As to those that have existed, this is probably the biggest category, Brian. Companies that have a waste program that they think they have, and is it the right one? I would encourage you to have to look around as those companies and check others and see what they can provide for you. All of us will do free waste audits, if you will, where we'll analyze what you're throwing away and how much. And here's what we believe the best case scenario for you is. And I would encourage companies to ask those questions, because you don't know what good looks like. It's hard to know what good looks like, right?
Yep.
So I would encourage that kind of research. That it's also important. I just want to mention real quick. Part of your sustainability program is to make sure that your suppliers to you have sustainable practices and giving you sustainable materials. I think forecasting both down to your customer level and up to your supplier level that sustainability is important to you will help make the program better, because then more people will be able to work with you on it. But I commend everybody in moving that direction. If they don't think they're there, then there's people to reach out to help assess your current environment.
Yep. Good advice. Great advice. Ray, thank you for your time today.
You're welcome.
Final question. I always have one last question. If people want to get in touch to learn more, how can they go about doing that?
I think the simplest way would be to go to our website. It's www.quest, QUEST, questrmg.com. You'll find a broad variety of information and answers on our website to get to your questions.
Yep, and probably a good place to get started, and then you can reach out and get in more detail. Thank you. I want to thank Ray Hatch for joining me today, and all of you for listening. We greatly appreciate it. And new episode of Talking Supply Chain comes out each Thursday on scmr.com. So be sure to check it out or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Until next time, this is Brian Straight, and you've been listening to Talking Supply Chain. Talking Supply Chain is produced by Supply Chain Management Review and Peerless Media. You can find it on scmr.com, supplychain247.com, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. For more information on this topic or to sign up for our weekly newsletter, a print or a digital subscription to our publication, visit scmr.com. We hope you will join us for our next episode. For Supply Chain Management Review, I'm Brian Straight, and thank you for listening.